You have a new message from your mom. Would you like me to read it to you?
Yes.
How did your date go this weekend? Is she a girl you would marry? Am I going to meet this girl? Do you think she could be the one?
Oh yeah, we're going right about here, so we should be good.
Ugh, babe, what is this, 1978? Can we just use the app, please?
No way, babe. I got this. We're going analog.
Okay, where are we going? I thought we could hit up all the thrift stores today.
Oh,
I thought we could go to Neiman's.
oh, it's fine. They have all the same stuff. It will be great.
No, they do not.
When are you going to get serious and commit? Am I ever going to get grandkids? What about my neighbor's daughter? She's not a 10, but she's nice.
Just use the app. Please, 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 just use the app.
Well, no, we'll just go to Neiman's. It'll be great. Okay, are you sure? It seems like you're mad.
Yeah, not a problem. I probably won't be able to buy anything, but it's okay.
Have you tried one of those dating apps? Do you want me to have your dad come over and give you some advice? Did he ever talk to you about the birds and the bees?
Daddy.
Hold on, girls, while I educate your mother.
I feel like you're mad.
I'm not mad. I'm not mad.
Dad, are we lost?
No, baby, we're just going on an adventure.
All right. Well, good morning, Chase Oaks. Good to see everybody. And whether you're at our Legacy campus or online right now or at Woodbridge, Sloan Creek, or in Espanol campus too, here later, we're just so thankful that you're here. Today, we start a new series called Wayfinder, and I believe, I'm excited about it because I believe God wants to do something really new in all of our lives, especially in this relationship area of life, arguably the most important part of our life. And Wayfinder is just about that. How do we find our way in order to achieve the kind of relationships we want? I think we all have an idea of where we'd like our key relationships to be, and yet it's hard to get them there. And when you're there, it's hard to keep them there, and relationships are tricky. So the good news is God has given us a lot of wisdom in the Bible about our relationships. And therefore, this is one of those series I encourage you to come every week to, and come open to God in the most significant relationships. Keep those in mind as you come, because I believe if we come each week will kind of build on each other, that at the end of that process, if we apply what God's wisdom is, all of our relationships will get significantly better. And that'll obviously be good. So I'm looking forward to what's going to happen. Now, today we're starting this series focusing on a unique relationship. And to announce that, or to kind of say what that's going to be, I'm going to do that in a little different way. I'm going to let Princess Bride, that movie, announce what we're talking about today. So let's listen for that.
Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today.
That's right. Now, I know a lot of you are like, what is that? You know, Princess Bride. You have a Netflix assignment this week, okay? If you've never seen Princess Bride, it's awesome. Awesomeness, okay? But today we are talking about marriage, or marriage. And I know some of you are like, oh, good, I'm glad, because you're probably married. And some of you are probably thinking, oh, no. Here I am again. Churches tend to be built around married people, and here I'm single. And now we're in this series, and it's a marriage series, and here we go. And it's not that. This is not a marriage series, as you'll see through this series. However, we are beginning this series on relationships with marriage in mind and focusing on that relationship for a couple reasons. One is because it is such a significant relationship and it is so misunderstood, and all of us will encounter it one way or another, whether we ever get married or not. But even more importantly, as we're going to see today, the components that make marriage work and the way God designed marriage are the same components that make every significant relationship work. And so what we talk about today is, even though as we focus on marriage and this unique design, it really is going to help us in any significant relationship we have. Now, the dream of marriage is one that is alive and well. I mean, in every culture in the world, one of the things that unites every culture in the world is this concept of marriage. I mean, over the centuries, they may have different specifics about it, but isn't that interesting that every culture in the world has this as a concept? I think because of it goes back to creation and God's design for us. Little kids, even dream about marriage. I mean, little boys, 3, 4-year-olds, who do they want to marry? They want to marry their mom. Some of you are like, yeah, it's fine if they're 4, just not 24, right, or 44. But little girls, what do they do with dolls, right? They'll take their dolls and march them down the aisle. And how many millions of times have Ken and Barbie been married over the decades, And marriage is alive and well, and it's this dream that people have, and yet it's also one it's a dream that's really hard to realize. It's really hard to get right and to experience in a way that you would say is dreamy. For some people, many people in whatever room you're in right now, for you, maybe you found the marriage dream to be a very elusive one. You like the idea of marriage, that would be great, but finding that right person, Mr. Right or Miss Right, is just not happening, and it's just sort of out there. It may be a little bit more complicated than that for you. If maybe some are same-sex attracted, and if you agree that what Jesus affirmed, marriage is between a man and a woman, then what do you do? So a marriage can be elusive. Marriage, you've experienced as a broken dream. I mean, every marriage starts out full of hope, and we're going to be great and all that, but 50% of them break. 50% of them end up in divorce. And of those 50% that don't end in divorce, how many of those are really life-giving and healthy and flourishing? And maybe you have experienced that brokenness yourself, or maybe you grew up in a broken home and are a child of divorce, or maybe you grew up in a home that never divorced, but it was never good, right? You were in just a marriage where they just stayed together out of stubbornness or whatever, and it was really a difficult thing. Or maybe you've experienced marriage as a nightmare, like the nightmare of abuse and abandonment, other kinds of things like that, where infidelity, where it just gets really, really hard. And because marriage is a hard-to-realize dream, I want us to go back to God's Word, go back to the Bible, because this is actually God's dream. Like, He designed this marriage thing, and I think we've lost touch with that in our culture. And there's some reasons why it's so hard to realize. And so what I want us to do is go back to the beginning. Go all the way back to Genesis. Go back to when God created man and woman and marriage. Today, we're going to do something kind of fun. We're going to go hang out with 2 naked people in a garden. And when's the last time you've done that? So hey, we're going to do that. And my talk today is, I'm just going to give it to you up front. It's 3 main points. That marriage is good, really good. Marriage is hard, really hard. Some of you are like, amen. But the hard is actually good, really good. That's my talk. Now, we're not ready to go to Luby's yet, okay? We got a lot to talk about, but that's where we're going today. So let's go and hang out with our naked friends in the Garden of Eden. Now, Blake last week spoke, and he alluded to the passage going all the way back to creation, when God is making all these things, and after He does so, He looks at it, He says, this is good, this is good. This is good. And then he makes humans. Adam, just the man, makes Adam. And He looks at Adam, and He doesn't say this is good. Instead, He said, very good. So for those of you who are human, one of the things that God believes about you at your core is you're very good. In the core created self, made in God's image, no matter what anybody else has said about you, God would say, at your core, very good. Okay, so God says that. But then in Genesis 2, there's something that's not good. And for the first time in creation, there's something not good. And what is that? Well, you have Adam there in the garden. In Genesis 2:18, the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. There's no Eve yet. There's no woman yet. I will make a helper suitable for him. So Adam is there in the garden. I mean, he has companionship, right? But he has no helper suitable like the animals do. So you've got Mr. Monkey has Miss Monkey, and Mr. Giraffe has Miss Giraffe, and Mr. Elephant has Miss Elephant. But Adam has nobody like that, and so God says, but for Adam no suitable helper was found. He had animals and lots of connection, but not what he was designed for. Now, I'm sure a lot of us in this room, or whatever room you're in right now, are animal lovers, right? Some of you maybe are horse lovers. You love that. Some of you are cat lovers. God bless you. It's good. Some of you are dog lovers, and you love your dog, and that's all great. I happen to be one of those. In fact, I'll introduce you to our dog. This is Chewbacca, or Chewy, and he's like the coolest part of our family. It's awesome, and it's a great connection, right? I love coming home. Like when I come home after work, Christy, my wife, is kind of like, oh, okay, you're home. But Chewy is not like that at all. Like it's the high point of his whole life is what it feels like when I come in the hallway, right? He's right there. He's turning in circles, turning flips, doing everything he can. He's like, oh, I can't believe it. I thought you were gone forever, but you're back. I was hoping you'd come back, and this is the best day of my life. We get to play. We get to have fun. This is so awesome, right? It's great coming back to that. It's awesome. I love it. It's a good thing. But we're designed for more than that. We're designed for even a deeper connection with that. And that's why God looks and says, okay, we've got to do something here. And so the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. Now he's going to make a woman, all right? So he's going to make Eve, the first woman. And at first glance, this is kind of, might bother you a little bit, especially if you're a woman, because he says, I will make a helper suitable for him. You think, oh, well, great. The way it's translated from Hebrew here is that woman is the helper, and that means that she's like the assistant or the subordinate. And that's why, women are around so they can be our little helper. And it's kind of like keep our iced tea cup filled. Or, I'm from Alabama, so you can picture some Alabama guy, saying, give me another beer, woman. And that's what this is all about. And some of you guys right now are like, amen, I like this church. This guy's good. I'm glad I came to church. But that's not what's going on here, okay? I think it's a really unfortunate translation from Hebrew. The Hebrew word translated helper is gezer, more fun to pronounce it geezer, but a woman is to be a geezer to a man, and vice versa. We're geezers to each other, or gezer. And what gezer means, when you look at that word in Hebrew, it doesn't just mean helper. It means it's used like friend, companion, partner. That God's intent was to create a partner for life, and that they would be partners to each other to say, hey, we're with each other and we are for each other. And as we pursue God's purposes for us, his destiny for us, as we get to know God, we're going to do that together in this partnership. And so God creates his partner, and that partner is Eve, the first woman. And when Adam, for the first time, a guy sees a girl, he says, whoa, man, he likes what he sees, and there you have woman. It's not how it worked, okay? But it's actually interesting how it did work. Because here's the first time a guy sees a girl ever in history. Here's what happens. He does poetry. For the first time, I can imagine this guy gets poetic. And girls, you do that. You can have that effect on us. He says, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. He gets poetic. In fact, a lot of scholars think this isn't just poetry, but a song because of the way it's written, that he would have sung this, the first love song. The second a guy sees a girl, he can't help himself. It's a love song. So if you're married, guys, let me give you just try this tonight. See if it works. Just put this to music, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. I'm going to call you woman because you're made up. Just see if that works for you. It might not, but just give it a shot. So he sees, they see each other and all that. And right away, we have this thing, not just man and woman, but we have this new relationship that we call marriage. That's based in this covenant, that's based in this vow. That's what happens next. That is why a man leaves his father and mother. This is God through Moses writing this in Genesis. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. All right, so that's marriage. And where we're going to start at its basic design is that marriage is good, really good. You may have experienced it as not so great, but in its original design, the way God wants it to be, marriage is good, really good as a dream. So let's go back and look at God's design. Again, we just read it. That is why a man leaves his father and mother, united to his wife, they become one flesh. Let's break that down. First, he says, that is why. Now, when he says that is why, right, it looks back. It's like, well, why marriage? Like, why is this even a thing? And a lot of people in our culture are like, yeah, why is that even a thing? Should it even be a thing? Like, what is marriage about? And that is why it goes back to the geezer thing or the gazere thing. Is that we're designed not to be alone, but to be partnered up in life. Now, marriage is one of those partnerships. It's not the only one. And some of you are single and or single again. You're like, hey, I'm married. I'm not interested in marriage. Don't want that. And that's fine. But you're not designed to be alone. You're designed to be partnered. There's other kinds of partnerships. And as a church, we try to facilitate those other kind of partnerships, but to be intentional about partnerships. People who are with us and for us in life, where we share life together. But people like Jesus, people like the Apostle Paul or whatever, show us that certainly you can be single and partnered and fulfilled and all that without marriage. So it's not like a necessity. In fact, we'll talk more about that next week. Next week, we're talking about singleness and marriage. And so if you're single or if you're married, it'll be applicable to you. If you're not single or married, then don't come because it won't have anything to do with you. But I think that's everybody, 100%. So that is why this partnership idea, this partner for life. And the way it works is a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife. So you leave the family that you grew up in, your family of origin, and you cling to this, you form a new family, you form this new commitment. It doesn't mean you don't give a flip about your family anymore. It just means you have a new priority. And it's not just to be together, it's together with a goal, and that goal is to become one flesh. The goal of marriage is oneness as you partner together to fulfill God's best, to fulfill God's destiny, to be such a close partnership that there's a sense in which you're not two people anymore, but increasingly one in this intimate, committed relationship called marriage. It's why earlier it says Adam and Eve were both naked and unashamed. And the reason they were naked and unashamed wasn't because they've been on Weight Watchers and going to the gym and, working out, doing CrossFit. It's because they were completely safe and authentic and open in this one flesh relationship. And that's the goal of marriage, is to become one flesh. Now, in order to do that, to become one flesh, that's not natural, right? That's a lifelong process of two people becoming one. In marriage, there's a couple of components at the core of marriage that make marriage work. And without these components, marriage does not become a dream. It becomes something much less than that. And that's, I think, what really has happened in our culture is these two components that I'll talk about have pretty much we take out of marriage. And if you take them out of marriage, you don't have biblical marriage anymore. You don't have God's design anymore. You still have people getting married. You still have weddings, but you don't have what God intended for us to be. And therefore, we never realize the dream. So I want us to say, okay, what are those components? These are necessary components. You can't take these out. And the first one is commitment. The basis of marriage is a commitment, is a promise, is a vow. It is a covenant relationship, a promise-based relationship. Jesus talks later when he's on the planet about marriage, goes back to Genesis as well. And he says, haven't you read? He replied, and this is in a context where people are asking him about divorce. And he's like, hey, don't you get it? And he says, haven't you read? He replied that at the beginning, the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. What Jesus is saying is that marriage at its core is a covenant between each other and between us and God. It's a vowed relationship. It's a promised relationship. It is a permanent relationship. And it's only in the context of that permanent, committed relationship where naked and unashamed can flourish. It is in that context. It's the only way we can get there. And that's why when we take commitment out of the mix, you can never actually get to the dream that God wants for us. And yet we live in a culture that certainly does that. If marriage gets too hard, then we bail because, it's just too hard. Or sometimes, like cohabitation as well. And I know a lot of people listening to me right now are probably, living together and doing the test drive kind of a thing. And I get that on its surface, that's logical. It makes sense. Hey, before we do that, try this out. And that's the way our culture thinks. So I'm not saying that to shame anybody because that's a pretty normal way for people to think. But actually, when you try to become one flesh or you have this kind of relationship without the marriage commitment, it actually works against you, not for you. Because at the base is this commitment where two people who, because the trying it out thing, making sure we're compatible. You're not. No two people are compatible. Really, you become compatible in this committed relationship called marriage. It's a process of becoming compatible and learning to be a team. And if you try to have that without commitment, you actually work against the relationship, not for it, which is why cohabitive relationships, people who've lived together before marriage, it's harder, about 2 times more likely for that marriage to end in divorce. And you think it'd be the other way around, but you just can't take the commitment thing out. And then it's not only commitment, it's not just committed to stay together, just out of stubbornness or whatever. It's a commitment, again, with the goal of one flesh, but the other necessary component is this thing called love. Now, of course, everybody knows what love is, right? Or think we know. And nobody would say, well, at the basis of marriage is love. Jeff Jones said that. Let's, put that on social media. That's amazing. We didn't know that. We thought it was something else. I think everybody would say, yeah, at the basis of marriage is love. But the problem is the way we think about love. And we've lost touch with what love is as God views it and as God sees it. And that's why people say things like, well, we fell out of love. We just don't love each other anymore. That's impossible with biblical love. So let's talk about that a little bit. So at the core is this biblical concept of love, but it's easy to get confused. And I understand why. Because when two people, meet each other and they start dating, a guy and a girl, and they experience this euphoria that makes you write love songs and makes you go poetic and you get all googly-eyed and you just can't think about anything else but this person and when you're going to see him again and there's this flurry of feelings and we don't even know what to call it, so we just say, well, I fell in love. And I get that. I mean, how else are you going to describe it? Because you didn't see it coming. It just happened to you. And then certainly that's what happened to me when Christy, my wife, and I started dating. We were both in college. We saw each other on the beach in Panama City, Florida, and realized we both went to school in Alabama, and we started dating when we got back to school, and those were exciting times, and I kind of went a little nuts, and I didn't see it coming. In fact, I didn't want to date. I didn't want to get married. At the time, I was an overly serious Christian that had decided I don't want anything to distract me from Jesus, and girls are a distraction from Jesus, and so I don't want anything to do. I'm just going to focus on Jesus. I'm not going to date. I'm not going to get married. I'm going to be celibate my whole life. We even had a little circle of friends that had kind of committed that. We called ourselves the He-Man's Women's Haters Club from the Little Rascals show, which was before my time even, but we had seen it. And guess what? Guess what percentage of the He-Man's Women's Haters Club are now married? 100%. But I was the first to go. And for me, Christy's the one that broke all that apart, right? And we started dating. And my poor roommate in college, his name is John Kim, great guy from Korea. I know he wished he'd never come to America from Korea because after every date, he'd be asleep, be late at night. And I would jump in bed next to him and say, John, wake up, I got to talk. And be like, what? And I said, tell him about that. I know, you're dating Christy, you're happy, good for you. I'd be like, no, I want to tell you the details and all that. And and that was great, and that was exciting, and that was fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, the Bible gives a whole book toward that kind of romantic love that in the context of marriage leads to, sexual connection and that kind of romance too. It's called the Song of Solomon. It's a great book, and God's all for it. But that's not what love is. Love is something different from that. Love allows those romantic feelings and all that to flourish, but love is something way deeper than that. And the Bible tells us what love is. It's not that. It's not those romantic feelings that come and go, because they will. You make me happy, you won't always make me happy. Love is something deeper than that. In fact, the Bible tells us in 1 John 4:10, it just spells it out. You may remember the Foreigner song, I want to know what love is. Well, here it is. I'm singing a lot this weekend. I don't know why. This is love. Not that we love God, but that he loved us and sent his son as an atoning sacrifice for sin. What John is saying, was one of Jesus' disciples, he's saying, look, if you want to know what love is, here's what it is. Picture Jesus hanging on a cross, dying to take the penalty for your sin and sacrificing his life. That's what love is. Did Jesus feel like doing that? No. Make him happy? No. Love is deeper than all that. Love is a decision. This a self-giving, self-sacrificing decision that I'm committing to you to do what's best for you no matter what. And that kind of love, that Jesus kind of love, is at the basis of marriage. It's not a feeling, it's a decision, it's a choice, biblical love. It's not passive, it's active. It's not just something that just comes on us and goes away. And, we used to have something, now we don't, it just went away. That's why when people say, well, I fell out of love, I get that you don't feel so romantic and happy anymore, but that's not love. You don't fall out of love. You choose love. You choose to love. You choose to self-sacrifice. You choose to commit. You choose to put that other person first. When you understand this kind of love, and you understand how inappropriate it is when people say things like this, and let me tell you, please don't ever say this to anybody, and that is, I don't love you anymore. That's the most anti-Jesus thing you can say to anybody. I don't love you, or I don't love you anymore. Because what you're saying is, a lot of times people mean it as a way to hurt the other person. Like, you're not worthy of my love. I don't love you anymore. And as a way to indict them. There's something wrong with you. I don't love you anymore. But actually, it's self-indicting. There's something really wrong with us if we say that. Because what we're saying is, I choose not to do what I committed to do. I'm too much of a wimp to do the hard work right now of loving you and staying committed to you and sacrificing myself for you, even though I'm not real happy right now. I'm just too much of a wimp to do that. That's what we're saying if we ever tell anybody, I don't love you anymore. Because love is not a feeling, it comes and goes. It's a decision, it's a choice. And let me give you one more picture of that kind of love. A lot of you know that my dad died a year and a half ago after a prolonged 2.5-year struggle with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a terrible disease. Your mind stays sharp, but your body goes away. And it was really an amazing picture of love watching. My parents have been married for 60 years. And to watch my mom care for my dad after 60 years of committed love. And watch her do things that she never thought she would have to do for him. They were really hard and really difficult. Every moment, every day, so difficult, so hard. And it was hard for him too. But she just kept after it and kept after it and kept after it, because that's what love does. They didn't have just hard times too. They also had some sweet times. As he was laying there, he couldn't talk. He was on this breathing machine. He was pretty immobile. But to watch her just lay there next to him, holding hands as they just enveloped each other in love. That's how you and I are designed to love and be loved. That kind of deeply Jesus-like, committed, connective love. And that kind of love allows all the other stuff, romance and sex and happy, all that's the byproduct of that kind of love. But it means being willing to work through hard and being willing to work through difficult in order to get there, which gets me to the next part of the talk. And marriage is good, but marriage is also hard, really hard. And there's a reason for that. And let's go back to our 2 naked friends in the garden, because they're about to not get naked anymore. They put on makeshift clothing in the story because they're not safe anymore because of what happens next in the story. So there they are in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, they're all happy, and everybody's happy because there's no sin. So they have perfect relationship. There's no disappointment, no death, no disease, no hurt, no anything. Everything is all good. But there's this being in the universe called Satan, who is the enemy of God and the enemy of you and me too. He does not want us to be happy because God loves us, and therefore he'll do anything he can, not just to oppose God, but to destroy us. We're the battlefield. Isn't that great? And he doesn't like marriage. He doesn't like it going well, and he doesn't like your marriage if you're married, and he doesn't like it going well. And he will do anything he can to split you apart. He will do it. And that's what he does with Adam and Eve. And he convinces them to sin. And sin is just rebelling against God. What he says is, hey, God's told you this is the way to live life and the way it should work and all that. But you don't want to do that. And he says if you bend to his better way, even though you don't really understand everything, that life will be good and there'll be consequences. If you don't, there's no consequences. Just do what you want to do. And he convinces them to do what you want to do. That's what we do every time we sin. And they sin. And when they sin, this is the first sin, that changes everything in our world. We now live in a broken world, not a perfect world, right? Where there's disease and death and destruction and decay and disappointment and friction and injustice. I mean, all that came with sin. And marriage all of a sudden becomes really hard. I mean, already marriage was two different people becoming one, but now it's two sinful, self-interested, selfish people trying to become one. And we think that's going to be easy? That's really hard. The dream is still there. It just now become very hard. The way one person wrote about this, his sort of definition of marriage after sin is this, that marriage is a system by means of which two persons who are so caught up by a dream and a purpose bigger than themselves that they work through the years in spite of repeated disappointment to make the dream come true. That's marriage. And if you're single, do you want that? Because you don't have to say yes to that. You don't. But if you're married, you already signed up for it. To work through repeated disappointment and hurt in order to get to the good. Because the only way to get to the good is to work through the hard. There's no other way. Now, I remember, when I was a little younger in my role in being a pastor here, I had more time and to do some things like premarital counseling. I finally figured out I'm really not good at it, and I just don't have time to do it right. And there are people who are really good at it, and that's like their calling. That's what they do, and everything goes better. But I used to, and I remember, just how distant it seemed to these young couples that it could ever be hard when they're engaged, right? And I would talk to this young couple, and they were on the other side of my desk and holding on to each other, and everything's so cute and so wonderful. And I'd try to talk about conflict and hurt and how to work through that. And I'd use examples about Christy and me. And it's almost like, they were like 20, and they, almost like pat me on my head. They weren't, but they're saying, oh, well, you and Christy are kind of messed up. But we're never gonna, she's never gonna hurt me. He's never gonna disappoint me. We got something, and all that. And then they go into honeymoon, and honeymoon just reinforces that, right? But it doesn't take long after the honeymoon for things to start going to heck, right? He leaves the underwear on the floor for the 25th time and the 50th time and the 125th time, and she's not so amorous and so whatever, right? And then it gets hard. And when it gets hard, you got to, then what do you do? And it's easy to bail when it gets hard, or just choose to not work through it. A lot of people just stay married, but they just never work through the hard. They just keep the hard there and the hurt there, and that's no good either. Or you just bail. And it happens a lot. In fact, I've heard over the last decade, I've heard this so many times, I don't think I can count. And it's another myth about marriage, and that's this statement. This is so hard, it just must not be meant to be anymore. At one time, we loved each other, and it was good, but now it's gotten so hard. There's no way that anything this good, this hard, would be good. Because anything good would never be this hard. And that's not true. Marriage is a good that only gets good, really good, if you work through the hard. There's no other way around it. The way people like my parents got to the good is working through 60 years of hard. And not just leaving hard, but working through hard. No other way to get there. And a lot of times I think we tend to think, well, hard is bad. But I want us to reframe that. And before I say that, because we're going to talk about why hard is good, we say, I know some of you right now are in the middle of hard. It's just hard right now. You're married, and it is hard. And let me encourage you, to work through the good. To work through the hard to get to the good. And you may need help to help you get there. You may need a third person or counseling or a group or Renew Me or Renew Marriage, something. There's all those things available here to do that, to get to where you need to be. And some of you are in the kind of hard that is toxic kind of hard. That's different. It's like abuse, for example. Abuse is not the kind of hard, well, I'll just get used to it. That's not the deal. If you're in an abusive relationship, you need to tell somebody. You don't need to stay in that kind of relationship. And it doesn't mean God can't do a miracle and change, but you've got to, you can't just act like that's not normal. That's not That's not the kind of hard I'm talking about. That's different. But the kind of hard I'm talking about is actually good if we're willing to work through it. And that gets me to the next part. Is that the hard is good, really good. I mean, anything good, like just think about working out, right? And being in shape. The only way to stay in shape, and I hate it, is the hard, right? If you show me, same way with spiritual maturity, if you show me somebody who's spiritually deep and mature, you're going to show me somebody who's been through a lot of hard and found God in it. And if you show me a marriage that's really good and really solid and really life-giving and is, and they've really built something, you're showing me a couple who's chosen to work through a lot of hard to get to the good. Marriage is a relationship more than any other. I mean, I know we're talking broadly about relationships in this series, but marriage, one of the unique things about marriage is that it more than any other can help us get toward the kind of maturity we really want, not just in marriage, but in life. Because marriage has a way of bringing out the best in us and bringing out the worst in us. Any close relationship can do that, but certainly marriage. And when I say bringing out the best, like John Mark Comer says this, the point of marriage isn't to find our missing half. It's to help each other become all that God intended, our future real selves. And marriage, two people partner to that end. They see the best in each other, the person God created them to be, and they push and pull each other toward that goal. For two, it's not just seeing what's wrong with each other, it's seeing what's right with each other and encouraging each other and helping each other. And I talk about working out. I work out a lot better if Christy's with me than when she's not. I quit a lot quicker. I don't flex my biceps quite as much if she's not there. So, right, she brings out the best. But that's true, not just working out in general. But marriage also has a way of bringing out the worst in us. Marriage is like a mirror. Any close relationship is like that, but certainly marriage is like a mirror. And most of us looked in a mirror today. And you look at a mirror, and especially first thing, you're like, oh gosh, is that me? Oh man, we got some work to do. God help me, please, God, you're gonna have to do something here because I don't want to go to church like that, right? And you see that, and mirrors don't lie. That's the thing about, right? They tell you where things are at, so you can choose, okay, I got to do something here. And marriage is a mirror. Now, sometimes people put the mirror on other thing, right, the other way, and about the other person. You're the problem. That's not what I'm talking. I'm talking about keeping it this direction and saying, okay, what is going on with me, and where am I really at? Because without that mirror, those kind of mirrors, we can think we're pretty good. It's like I'm a good guy. I'm an Alabama fan. I love Jesus. I'm good, and all. But let me just. I'll just share a live example, okay, from me, how marriage can be a mirror that really shows where you are. And it's good if you take it to Jesus. He can bring healing and maturity and health in that area of brokenness. So I just got back from study break, and Christy was with me most of that time, which is unique. A lot of times on the study part, I'll go off by myself, and then we'll do vacation. We mix this all up this time. So I would study in the morning until about 1 or 2, and then we would goof off in the afternoon. So we spent a lot of time together, which was great. But it was also disappointing. And what was disappointing was me. So here's what I mean by that. So this goes back 28 years. So we've been married almost 30 years. And 28 years ago, we were living in Dallas. I was working part-time at this church as an intern, going to Dallas Seminary, which is graduate school for pastors. We went out on a date to see a movie, and it was a movie that was a pretty heavy movie, showing a marriage. It was a pretty painful marriage. So we drive back after that movie, and we were just both quiet. Didn't say a word. It's just a heavy thing. And we park in the apartment complex, and before we go up, I just said I wanted to talk to her because there were some things something she had done that really hurt. And I wanted to talk about how she hurt me. And so, and yet instead of just me telling her that, I decided I would give her the opportunity to be nice. And so I said, hey, is there anything I do that hurts you? And to be honest, I wasn't as interested in that as me telling her, what she does that hurts me. And I really didn't think she'd have anything to say. I was just a nice thing to do. I thought she would say, you hurt me, are you kidding? I'm thinking about writing a book about how to find a husband like Jeff because, I've hit the jackpot. But that's not what happened. And we never got, by the way, in that conversation to what she was doing that hurt me. We never even got there. And for good reason. And so she said, there is. In fact, you did it earlier tonight, and it really does hurt. And it drives a wedge. And I said, well, what is that? And she said, well, sometimes when I say something that you, I guess, don't agree with or you think is not smart or stupid or whatever, I'll say it, and then you do this little laugh, kind of this dismissive little kind of thing. So every time you do that, there's something in me toward you that just dies. And it sort of seals off my heart toward you. And I guess, it just makes me feel like I'm stupid, or you think I'm stupid. I don't think I am, but that's what you think, or my feelings are invalid. And it really hurts. And I'm so glad I didn't go at that moment. I didn't. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I didn't. And actually, it rung true, right? And I was in seminary. We had access to counselors at the seminary, and so I went and got help and talked. I said, hey, what is it? What is so broken in me that I do that? And it feels good to do that in the moment. And what's so insecure in me? What's so mean in me? What's so arrogant in me? Like, what's that? But it was a mirror, right? And if I take that to Jesus, I could get defensive. Or if I take it to Jesus, then he can use that to be redemptive in my life and make me the kind of person that I really do want to be. And that's what this can do. But here's what's disappointing on break. So we're driving down the road, we'd been at dinner, and she said, hey, there's something I want to talk to you about. So because you did this earlier today, and she said, sometimes when I say something, you'll do this dismissive little laugh. 28 years later, and it's like, here we go again, and for me, it's just like, oh no. And we reflected back on that conversation. I said, Christy, I'm so sorry. That's not what I want to do or what I want to be, but but again, it enabled me to take that to Jesus. And Jesus is a good redeemer, and he can heal us and he can grow us. It's not just a mirror that takes us to say, well, I'm going to gut it out and try to be better. You can try to make yourself better, but good luck with that. Especially when Jesus, who's all-powerful, wants to come into your life and transform you and change you from the inside out. And if you have yet to begin a relationship with Jesus and you want to be a good married person or a good friend or have close relationships, I think you need Jesus. At least that's what I found. I couldn't do it without Jesus. I know that. So marriage is, as we put all this together, is good, really good. But it's also hard, really hard. But here's the cool thing, is hard is good, really good. Because if you're willing to work through the hard, as we just said, you end up becoming the kind of people that you want to become, and you able to develop this one flesh partnership relationship that's never perfect, but is increasingly good. It really is. And it's there if we want it. So let's think about this a little bit. I don't know where you're coming from in this, when we talk about this stuff. Some of you are single, and I probably just scared you away from marriage. It's like, I'm never doing that. And maybe that's okay. Okay, you don't have to do it. But it would at least argue, right, to say, hey, I better choose a good partner, right? Somebody who's, if you're a Christ follower, who's a Christ follower, somebody who's going down the same road and all that, because it's hard enough if I don't choose well, but it's worth waiting to choose well. For some of you right now are married, and like we said, you're in the middle of hard. And hey, every marriage gets there. You're not, we all look like we're all doing great, but all of us either are going through hard or have gone through hard if we're married. And you've got a choice to make. Now, there are some kinds of hard you need to, that's abuse and all that, that's way different, but I'm talking about the normal hard. You can work through it or not. But the basis of marriage is committed love that says, look, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to fight for you, and I'm going to fight for this, and I'm going to be willing to take where I'm broken, because the problem in marriage is me, not just you. And, and you've got that choice to make. And you may need help. I know I've been thankful for help. And some of you are in the good. It's just good right now. And that's awesome because, you earn good. You've had to work through hard to get to good. And enjoy the good. Because guess what? It's going to get hard again. Just the way it is. Let's bow our heads together. Father, I do thank you for this wonderfully difficult and wonderfully fruitful and joyful thing called marriage. And Father, I know we've all experienced marriage differently in the way we grew up, in the way we've lived as adults. And God, would you help us? in our key relationships, not just marriage, but in our key relationships, to love like you do. And Father, I pray for marriages in this room that I know many of them are going through difficulty right now. And I pray that you'd fill people with hope and with resolve, with humility. Father, I know for some it's a long shot miracle, and I pray that'll happen. Father, I pray for those who've been wounded and hurt, who are still reeling with the pain of divorce in their own life, and I pray for healing and perspective there. Father, I pray for people who are on the wrong side of her, like abuse and that kind of thing. Father, give them resolve to get help. And I thank you for all those who are experiencing the good as well. So, Father, in this series, we just ask that you continue to speak to us and continue to encourage us and challenge us. We know that you want this part of life to be really good. And so, Father, would you help us in our key relationships throughout this series become better and better? In Jesus' name, amen.